Okay, so in this video, let's have a look at Collision, which is another synthesizer in Ableton, and it works in a different way, using a different concept. So operator was a combination really of subtractive, additive, and frequency modulation in terms of the way that it does synthesis. Collision is or uses physical modeling. So it tries to emulate parameters of physical objects that can be struck and bowed and vibrated and so on in order to make sound. So let's have a look at the Collision instrument. This is it down here. It's in the instruments section of the browser. So the key areas of this instrument are its excitator. It's called in this one. I would just call it exciter, but it's called the excitator. And its resonators. There's two, which are the same, but can be used together in a couple of ways. We're just going to stick to using one for the time being. So essentially the resonator is the part of the synthesizer that actually makes sound, and then the exciter is what excites that into making sound. So if you imagine a guitar string by itself, it doesn't make any sound. You have to pluck it or strum it for it to make any noise. Or if it was a violin, you would bow it or pluck it. If it was the membrane of a drum, then you'd hit it with something. So they're the kind of principles that are working in this synth. So let's have a look at some of the parameters. We definitely won't look at all of them, but we'll look at some of the main ones. And to do that, we'll try to make a couple of different sounds. So let's have a little play around with this thing. So I'm just going to play a couple of notes on my MIDI controller. Okay, so at the moment, we've got a sort of bell-like sound happening. Let's have a look through a couple of features. So at the moment, you've got two types of exciters. There's mallet, which is it tries to model what happens if you strike something. So if you hit something with a mallet, it's going to be more attacky. It's not going to have as much sustain or any sustain unless the thing that you hit resonates for a long time. So if you imagine hitting a gong, you hit it once, but it resonates for a really long time. If you hit something like a snare drum, it doesn't resonate for very long. It's a short sound. So they're the kind of things to be thinking about. Other than that, you've got noise, which will disturb the resonator in a way similar to blowing across the top of a bottle or bowing something. So it's more of a continuous stream of energy. All right, let's have a bit of a play with this. So first thing we'll have a look at, we've got the mallet, and I'm going to leave the parameters as they are for the time being. Let's just go through the different types of material that we can resonate. So we've got a beam, marimba, string. Yeah, it sounds a little bit more like a string. Membrane. Okay, so this could be good for sort of gong sounds or drum sounds. Plate, sort of like a membrane but more metal. Pipe and tube. There's a few different options there. And then the other key parameters that we want to look at are decay, and I'm going to stick to marimba for the time being, and material. So decay should be pretty straightforward. If I shorten that, there's less decay, less time to resonate. And if I increase it, longer time. If we move this upwards, the material, it simulates objects made of metal or glass. So there's more high frequencies, and if we move it down, it simulates materials made of rubber or wood. Okay, so it gives you a less high frequencies. Let's shorten. glassy and more metally. Okay, so let's have a go at making a couple of different sounds. Let's have a go at a string for the time being. So this is going to sound like, if we keep the material down and the decay short, we can simulate a kind of muted guitar plucking effect. Bringing the brightness down would help that. Okay, with this kind of synthesis, I wouldn't be aiming to create, exact replicas of guitars or violins or whatever. I'd be using it to create something different than that. If you want to have violins and guitars, you're better off recording them or using samples. Using a synthesizer like this, you can sort of emulate those things, but you can get much more unusual and interesting sounds out of it. Okay, so there's a kind of mute guitar sound. If we increase the decay and change the material, we've got a bit more of a nylon string kind of sound. And if we bring the material up, we should be able to get more of a steel string sound. It's almost a harpsichord sound there. And if I bring the brightness back up, okay, so this kind of harpsichord, and if I bring it down here, it's more like a harp or maybe a nylon string kind of guitar. Playing around with this hit parameter changes where you're striking the string. So at 0, it's nearer to the center, and at the plus and minus ends, it's nearer to the edges. So have a listen to center. It's a bit more high end towards and less body. And the listening positions are where it's picked up from on the strings. So there are other parameters that you can experiment with. So we'll leave it there for strings. And there's plenty more to experiment with there. Let's move on to a different sound. So I'm going to try and make some percussive sounds. Let's start with a kind of a kick drum type of sound. Again, they're not going to sound exactly like real drums, but that's okay because I'm not trying to create real drums. I'm trying to create something interesting. This is already kind of a gong-like sound. All I need to do is increase the decay, and we've got a big kind of bell gong-like sound. Changing the stiffness of the mallet changes the tone. So if I increase that, it's gonna have more attack and be sharper, and if I bring it down, it's gonna be more like a brush sound. So more attack and click there. More of a brush sound there. So if we take the decay right down and just increase the volume, you get a kind of snarey sound. So that's basically just by almost taking the resonator out. All right, let's try to get a bit of a kick drum sort of sound. So I'm just bringing the decay down, bring the brightness down, and you can tune that. That's fine tuning, and you can bring it down even further here. Play around with the stiffness, more attack, more of that brushy kind of sound. It's pretty loud, so bring that down. Okay, and I'm going to shorten the decay even more to play some high notes. So this will give you like a pitched kind of percussion sound. That could sound good with a little bit of delay. Let's just put some on there. Bit of reverb. Okay, so percussive sounds, they're really good for tuned percussion. And again, if we shorten the decay even more, you're going to get less of the note. Let's bring the delay out of there. And higher notes sound like that. Okay, so there's a little bit on percussive sounds. We haven't looked at the noise parameter here yet, so let's have a look at that. So we'll come back to strings as well maybe, but let's have a look at the next instrument over. So back to default state. This time let's try to create a sort of panpipes or, you know, blowing across the top of a bottle effect. So we're going to work with pipe and tube. Let's start with pipe, and we don't want any of this percussive element, so I'm gonna, in fact we'll leave that on but turn the noise up, and we're going to turn the noise parameter on here. And that's not doing anything at the moment because the decay level is low, so let's turn that right up, and you can hear the noise there is working, but the pipe's not resonating it. So let's filter that a bit. And try the tube. Okay, let's play some lower notes. Let's give it a little bit more release. Okay, so you can hear how that's sort of sounding like something blowing across a tube. Let's change the and we just need to give it a bit more volume. This will give us the effect of hitting, you know, the end of different lengths of PVC pipe. Let's go a bit lower. Don't know if you've done that before, but you can get the idea if you have. So that's with the mallet on, and if we turn the noise on and the mallet off, we get that kind of sound. Let's have a go of pipe instead. All right, so these are more sort of sustained sounds. Let's give the attack a bit more time. A bit more release. Okay, so you can get some interesting effects there, and I'll try to create a sort of bowed string sound. So I'm going to use the string resonator, but instead of mallet like I had before, I'm going to use noise. Let's bring that down a little bit. nice because you can hear the noise kind of bouncing on the string, it sounds like. Okay, so a little bit like what you might get from a, you know, like a stringed instrument. Alright, there's a basic overview of this instrument. There's a lot more to it than that, but that should give you an idea of the basic idea that's behind it, which is physical modeling, and how to use it. And there's the other resonator, and there's also a modulation section which has LFO, which you should know something about from using Operator. Alright, thanks.